Okay. So second share, I figured a good topic would be the Haftarot of the 3 weeks because we just started them. And I'd like to sort of suggest that the rabbis have like really good chutzpah, because they're Jewish, of the Haftarot they pick. Because in theory, what are we mourning for during the 3 weeks? The temple being destroyed. And the Haftarot that we're going to read are about prophets who are saying how the people misunderstood the temple, like how much damage the temple did. They picked up the Haftarot where God's saying, I'm angry with you, not because you're not serving me, because you're serving me the wrong way. Especially the one we read before Shabbat Chazon from Yeshayahu. Remember the famous line, who needs all your korbanot? So I'll just give another title for this year, and then we'll get to work. We'll start with Yirmiyahu. I'd like to title the first. Everyone knows the first chapter in Isaiah. Remember Shabbat Chazon Yishai ben Amotz, where he says, the title I like to give it is "Don't give me that bull." That's what Isaiah is saying. Remember he says, "I don't like." He uses the word parim. Remember, I've had it with your oxen, etc., and all your sacrifices. Now, the Nevi'im aren't saying, therefore, I don't want a temple. That's saying the temple is great when it's understood the right way. When it's misunderstood, it can cause more damage, more harm than good. And that's one of the key messages of Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu. And those are the Haftarot that we're going to read. Those are the prophets we're going to be reading from. Now, just a quick review. The Haftarot for the 3 weeks are the first 2 chapters of Yirmiyahu, Perek Aleph and Perek Bet. The first chapter of Yeshayahu is going to be Shabbat, the 3rd week, 3 weeks. And on Tisha B'Av itself, in the morning, we read from Yirmiyahu chapters 8 and 9. We'll quote from some of them also. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to take bits and pieces from there, but I want to begin with a line in, here. I'm going to be, in source A. I want to begin with a line, we're going to read not this week, but next week, from the 2nd chapter of Yirmiyahu, where he sort of throws the book at them. But I want to use that as a point of departure. So look in source A. Everyone have source A? It's Haftarah for Parshat Maseh. If you have in your Haftarah section. Shimud Dvar Hashem Beit Yaakov. Anyone needs a sheet? Please, if you need the sheet here. Over here. Here. Pass those around. Everyone have over there? Pass these around. Anyone else need? There. Take them there. Here, pass behind you. We're good? Everyone has? Okay. We have a mirror also? Yeah? So we're going to read from Shimud Dvar Hashem Beit Yaakov, B'chol Mishpat Beit Yisrael. See the word Mishpacha? It fits actually nicely with the Mifkat. Okay. Kol Ma Hashem, Ma Matzu Avotechem Bi'avel, Ki Rachakum Alai, V'yuchlu Acharei Hevel V'yabalu. Okay. What's God saying? Ma Matzu Avotechem Bi'avel. What's the Navi complaining about? The Navi is complaining about the people complaining about God. Because who are they blaming the problems on? The people are blaming God for their problems. Ever hear such a thing? Okay. Now, and they follow, what's Hevel? That's a big theme in Chumash, isn't it? Ever since... Yeah, but Hevel is like there's a whole book about it. Now, but the people, what's the opposite of rachok? It says ki rachakum alai. Yeah. What word sounds like karov with the temple? Korban, which means? Yeah. Doesn't mean a sacrifice. It means coming close to God. And where's the first time you have a korban in Chumash? Didn't say korban. Brings an olah. Noach doesn't bring a korban. Kain Hevel don't bring a korban. They bring a mincha. It's a present. The word korban is not until Sefer Vayikra. The word korban, until the Mishkan is built, there's no korban. Because korban doesn't mean sacrifice. Korban means an expression of closeness to God, to be karov. No. But it's cute to keep rachakum alai as opposed to being close to me. Okay? Now he goes on and says, V'lo amru ayeh Hashem, Hamelo otem eretz Mitzrayim. We'll return to this in a minute. Hamolech otenu bamidbar, be'eretz Arava, etc. No, it's What question didn't they ask? The people, let me go back a step. Why are the people complaining to God? What's God doing wrong? In the time of Yirmiyahu, who's our arch enemy? The Babylonians. What are they doing to us? They're taking over our country little by little, aren't they? They're putting a siege. They're the arch enemy. What's Yirmiyahu's main message, if you ever read the book? Right? Why is Bavel so successful? God says over and over again, I'm on their team. God tells Yirmiyahu to tell the people, I'm sending the Babylonians in to punish you for your misbehavior. I warned you. I warned you during the time, I warned you over and over again to fix your ways. You didn't listen to me, and therefore your punishment is, I'm allowing the Babylonians to take over your country. If you want to accept your punishment, put up a white flag to the Babylonians and give up your sovereignty. That's your punishment. If you fight them, you're going to lose. And you're going to die, you're going to get exiled, you're going to lose your temple. He warns them over and over again. The only way to save yourself is putting up a white flag to the Babylonians. Got that? Now, if a rabbi said that nowadays, oh my gosh, okay, he'd be voted out of the Knesset for sure if he was in the Knesset. Now, I'm not saying it's the same thing today. I'm just saying, just imagine someone saying something like that. In fact, what do they accuse Yirmiyahu of being? A traitor and a false prophet. They want to kill the guy. He keeps getting saving by, at the last minute, he gets getting saved. And he hates his job because Yirmiyahu is a right-winger deep down in heart, but God's telling him to give the opposite message. In other words, no one wants to give the message that God wants you to give up a white flag and give in to your enemies. But God's saying, you need rehab. I can let you do rehab at home. If you don't listen to me, you have to rehab in a different country. And that's Yirmiyahu in a nutshell. Now, in the meantime, the people are praying to God, save us from Yirmiyahu, save us from the Babylonians. And where are they going to pray to God, asking God to save us from the Babylonians? They're going to the Beit HaMikdash. They're praying with their whole hearts, God, save us from the Babylonians. And what's Yirmiyahu tell them? Right? If you want to listen to me, no, but it's too late. That's over already. I warned you for 20-some years, bend your ways. Now it's too late. That's what's so hard about Yirmiyahu. For the next 70 years, Bavel's in charge. Nothing you can do about that. You still have to mend your ways, but mending your ways isn't going to get, like when you go to the dentist and you have a root canal, it says, remember to brush your teeth. But once you have the root canal, but once you have the cavity, brushing your teeth ain't going to help. That can prevent something. But once the damage is happening, brushing your teeth won't help anymore. You need a root canal. Now, I forgot that analogy. That's what's so difficult about it, Yirmiyahu. But the people are complaining to God, God, why aren't you helping us? And Yirmiyahu is answering them, you're to blame, don't blame God. That's why, how come you're blaming God? God does everything for you. He wants you to be good. If he's sending enemies to punish you, it's a wake-up call to do proper tshuva. Now, how would you translate that? The people aren't asking what question should the people be asking?
Where is God?
Yeah. Now, how would you answer that question? Where is God?
Where is man?
What?
Where is man?
Oh, that's a classic answer. Like that's the Shoah's answer. Like where was God? Where was man? But ayed doesn't mean in Hebrew. I mean, where's God? And we learned God's everywhere, isn't he? He's there, everywhere. Ayed doesn't mean where. I'll explain the difference. How would you say where something in Hebrew? If you're looking for your keys, how would you say it in Hebrew? Remember, where is something? If let's say you're looking for your brothers, they're supposed to be in Shechem. You want to know where they are. You get to Shechem and they're not there, and you bump into somebody. What would you ask them? Eifo him ro'im. Remember that? But if I'm a teacher and I have 20 students in class, and Johnny isn't not in class today, Johnny's seat is empty. I'm going to ask, where's Johnny? What am I asking? I want to know, what answer do I want to hear?
Why?
I don't want to know where he is. I want to know why isn't he here. Got it? But let's say I'm going. We have a cookout. Very good. That's right. And God knows where he is, doesn't he? He's omniscient, right? Right. But I think he's hiding, isn't he? How do you know Adam's hiding? Who's Adam hiding from? From God, right? That's his answer, right? God's not asking where are you. He's asking, why aren't you here with me in Gan Eden? Why are you hiding? And Adam explains why he's hiding. Ayeh doesn't mean where are you, but why aren't you here? Let's say I'm going for a cookout. It's Yom HaTzmaut, we're going for a cookout, and we have a grill and everything, and we have we have grill, we have coals and everything, but there's no hamburgers, no hot dogs. And I ask, where are the hot dogs? Right? What am I asking? I don't know where they are. I want to know why do we pack them? So let's say I'm going for a cookout on Har Moriah, okay? And there's fire and there's wood, but I don't see a lamb, right? Yeah. Ayeh doesn't mean where is it? You want to know? Hey, how come? What's his age? That's so dumb. Unless he's 3, but let's say he's older. But he's saying what? Hey, how come there's no? He's hinting something. And what's God's answer? God will show us. God's going to provide us. Does God answer? That's a prayer, by the way. Now, how do I know that Avram prayed by the Akedah? What? I know he prayed because we say that in davening. Mishana Avram Avinu B'Har Moriah. Huyanenu. We wouldn't lie in davening, would we? But where does it say he prayed? He prayed. Hashem Yireh. And how do we know God answered his prayer? Because what did God do at the end of the story? He showed him, hey, of course there's an aisle right there. You just didn't see it. Remember? And what's Avram called the place when it's over? Now it makes sense, doesn't it? It says Rashbam on the spot. Rashbam, what?
He doesn't say korban. He says like
Oh yeah. It says, wait, that's a. It doesn't say korban there. It's always an olah. Noach brings an olah. Now back to Ayeh. Okay, Ayeh. So the question isn't it? We say in Avarachamim, Lamo Yemra Goyim, Ayeh Elohem. Right? We want them to ask where God is. Right? What question? Why isn't your God helping you? You follow? In other words, what question should the people be asking? Why isn't God with us? When God's with you, He helps you. If God's not helping you, He's not with you. So when we lose battles to the Babylonians, what question does God want us to ask? Why isn't God with us? Not where's God? Why isn't He with us? What's that imply? We're doing something wrong. And therefore, the job of the Navi is he's saying, if God sends an enemy to punish you, it's a wake-up call that something's rotten in your society, something's wrong, and you have to do tshuva. Now, the rabbis say if you don't find anything wrong, so you say it's in, what do you call it? Yisum Sha'ava. But usually there's something wrong. Now, what's wrong is always something. That's why God gave us so many fingers, so we can point them at somebody else. Now, the people aren't introspecting. You understand what the Nabi is saying? I sent Babel to punish you, and you're not asking the right question. You're asking, how do we, God, come help us defeat them? Saying, you got it all wrong. You don't understand the purpose. God sent them to punish you. If you understand that and do tshuva, then God will help you. But if you don't understand why He sent them, you'll never get that right help. So He says, you're not asking the question. Now in Pasuk Chet, he goes, what we're doing wrong. And he's going to attack everybody. He's got 4 fingers to point. Now, who's he pointing at? HaKohanim lo amru ayeh Hashem. Who are the Kohanim? Those are the priests in the temple, the people working. What question should they be asking when people come to the temple to pray? What should the people be asking? No, they say, how come God isn't with us? And they should give him a good rabbi speech. Okay. V'tovsei Torah lo yidauni. Who knows what that means? Who are Tovsei Torah? Those are the people studying and teaching Torah. What don't they know? They didn't study Aristotle? What does it mean they don't know God? That'll be our topic. In Yirmiyahu, knowing God has a very specific meaning. And it's not Aristotle. It's nothing theological or a thing. God, yeah, we'll see. We're going to see a definition of what it means to know God. Okay? But again, he's complaining about the Kohanim, but he's complaining about all the religious leadership. The Kohanim, the Tovsei Torah, Haroim, who are the shepherds? Those are the political leaders. Okay? Pashubi, we'll see why, but the political leaders go against me, because I told the political leaders to give in to Babel and they didn't listen. Got it? V'anevim nivu babal, v'achei lo yilu halachum. The Nevim, Yirmiyahu calls them Nevi'ei Sheker. They call themselves Nevi'ei Hashem. Because in Yirmiyahu, what are the Nevi'im saying? The Nevi'im are saying, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem. Remember Yirmiyahu complains about the Nevi'ei Sheker all the time? You've heard of them, Nevi'ei Sheker? They're not Nevi'im of other gods. They're God's Nevi'im, but the message they're giving them is Baal worship. What's that mean? Yirmiyahu is really harsh. He calls the people coming to the temple to pray for God to give them rain and God to give them military help. He says, you're not serving God, you're serving Baal. Now, they're not serving Baal. Baal, that's a rain god. But what's the problem of Baal worship? We just had it last week in Balpur. When your whole relationship with God, when you're called consumer mode, when the gods are working for you. So I need to grow crops, but I need rain and I need fertility. So what did ancient man think? There's some power in charge of the rain, and there's a power in charge of fertility. Remember Baal and Asherah? They're a thing. And if I want my crops to grow, who do I have to pray to make sure I have rain and fertility? I serve Baal and Asherah. How to serve them? You have an orgy in the temple. You have a great way to get people to come to shul. So you bribe them. You give them food, and you do little rituals, and you do the whole shake, and you say there's ways of bribing God. You can. What did Bilam? I just explained last week's Haftarot. Bilam tells Balak, I can only do what God lets me do, right? Every Aliyah ended that way, if you paid attention last week. Now, how are we going to get God to allow us to curse? So Bilam tells Balak, I can only curse if God allows me to curse. So I need permission from God to curse. What are we trying to do to get God to allow us to curse? Balak has a great idea. Let's go to a high place. Remember, every round, what's Balak say first? Balak has a great eitzah, has a great advice. Let's go to a high place. Remember, Bamod Baal, Rosh HaPisgah, you always go to a high place. And what's Bilam tell him to do? On that high place, build what? 7 Mizbachot, and bring Par Va'ayel on the Mizbech. Maybe, if you stand at a korban and give your full kavanah there and daven, and if I bring korban on a high place, maybe we can get God to listen to us. Remember that idea? Remember we read in Haftarah last week from Micha? Remember? Zechorna ma ya'atz Balak ma nata Bilam. What was Balak's idea? Let's go to a high place. What did Bilam answer? What do you call it? Let's build a mizbeach and pray, and maybe God hug. Did that work? Remember how's Micha? Go back a page. That was last week's Haftarah from Micha. Haftarah for Balak. Yeah, it's right on top of Parshat Pinchas. Zechami zechorna ma ya'atz Balak ma nata Bilam. ישעיתי מעל גלגל, במה אקדם השם, אלקף להם, אקדמנו בעולות, בגלים בני שנה, הריצה השם באלפי עולות. Remember? Do you think you can buy God with lots of oil and lots of animals and all these korbanot? Does God want your firstborn child, etc.? יגיד לך אדם מה טוב ומה השם דורש ממך, כי מעשות משפט, אהבת חסד ועצני לכת. That's a famous line we all know, don't we? But that's why Chazal picked that Haftarah for Balak. Because why do we need the story of Balak? To know the korbanot don't work by themselves. Because that's idol worship, IDLE, not IDLL. When you're in consumer mode and God's working for you, if I say the right parak and kilim, or I bring the right animal, something magical, that'll get God on my side, you misunderstood the religion. And therefore Yirmiyahu is saying, you're coming to the temple and praying to God for God to work for you. He called you Ovdei Baal. Understand? Yirmiyahu says in parak, that's a whole, he says over and over again, Baal is long gone. Baal worship, they wiped them all out way back. But Yirmiyahu is complaining to people who claim to be people coming to Beit HaMikdash. He calls them Yerov Dei Baal. It's chapter 7 in Yirmiyahu. He talks about that. Now, let's go back to this. So, what is the Nevi'im saying? I mean, the Nevi'im are telling the people, if you want God to help you, come and bring korbanot at the temple. Remember, it's called Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem. It's going to be the Haftarah for Parshat Tzav. Now, but I want to go back to the, so let's go back. The Kohanim didn't ask Ayeh Hashem. It means they're not asking the right question, how come God's not with us? And what would they answer? God's not with us because your behavior is bad. Okay. What's the meaning of Tov said lo yida'uni? Okay. So here, I'm going to read now from Yirmiyahu chapter 9. We're going to read this on Tisha B'Av. The finale, it's the end of the Haftarah for Tisha B'Av, in source B. Yirmiyahu is explaining why God's not helping them, why He's bringing a korban. He says, "Vayadruchut l'shonam kashtam sheker." Look at that. Notice what happens. They're practicing with fake news, like saying what do you call it? But How do you shoot an arrow? You have to pull it back. That's called lidroch, and then you shoot it. You see the analogy? What's being compared to arrows? Your mouth. When you say fake news. You say things. You make up stories. You try to get people's opinion. You lie, etc. But you prepare for it. So lidroch your lashon. You know how beautiful that analogy is? How harsh it is? Lidroch is like getting the arrow ready. Your lashon is your arrow. Got it?
It seems in a way, that like if I wanted to convince, I would remind them of the Greek. Like we're a covenantal people, and the reason that the relationship works is because there's a Greek.
Yirmiyahu's going to do that. He'll do that. That's Perek Yud Gimel in Yirmiyahu. Okay. Now back to, but people think the Brit is God's working for us, not we're working for God.
But that's not the Greek.
Yeah, but that's what people think it is. Most people think they're in consumer mode.
Covenantal means.
Yes, we're chosen. We lucked out. We thank God for it because we get protection, as opposed to responsibility to think it's privilege. But that's a whole long story. Now, so ve'duchet l'shonam kashtam sheker lo v'lo emunah gavru ba'aretz. It's not based on trust and faith in God, but rather, okay? Ki miraya ra'a yatzel v'oti lo yadonu Hashem. They go from one evil to another, and they don't know God. What do you mean they don't know God? They're praying to God. We'll see what it means not to know God. Everyone's lying to each other. No one's telling the truth. They're faking, and everyone's doing Rachel, Rachilas, whatever that is. Okay. No, it's truth is like your political opinion is so important. You're allowed to lie. It's a mitzvah to lie. You can make TV stations and radio. Lying is okay because you have a higher goal. But you're living in what's called tabut sheker. If you say something 100 times, people will start believing you. Now, living in that whole road of mirma. What's mirma? It's not just lying. They had a good word there. Deceit. Exactly. And that caused them not to know God. For that type of sin, you think I can't punish you? A nation is known for lying and cheating and not telling the truth. Do you think God can identify with that nation? He goes on and on. What's the bottom line? We changed the Haftarot mode from Echa to regular. So there's three things that people take pride in that are important, but they're not the goal of life. They're tools and not goals. Right? What are they? There's wisdom, there's wealth, and there's strength. So he's saying, if someone is wise, don't pride yourself of your wisdom. The goal is not wisdom, the goal is using your wisdom properly. If someone is gibor, if he's strong, the goal is not being strong, the goal is using your strength to use it properly. If you have wealth, the goal is not becoming wealthy, the goal is what you do with your wealth. It's called legacy funds. Now, okay. What should you be going? What should your goal be? Those are important tools, but not the goal. You don't measure things by your GNP or your, you know what that is? No, you don't measure by wealth, by production, by. You know the big chiddush in economy I learned that they used to measure wealth by how much gold you had, and then they realized you measure wealth by how much you're producing. That's called GNP. No, it's your gross national production. So you measure economies not by how much money they have in the bank, but how much they're producing. That's a class in economics, which I don't understand, but sounds good. Now, but I'm saying, what do you judge? What do you judge success by? How wealthy you are, how strong you are, how wise you are. Now, if you want, what should your goal in life? It's to know God. What's it mean to know God? Right? What does God want you to do? Do what? Chesed, mishpat, and tzedakah. According to Yirmiyahu, what does it mean to know God? Doing chesed, mishpat, and tzedakah. The same thing Micha said 100 years earlier. He did with a little more tsunua. I remember he had to say lechet together with that. Remember I said chesed and mishpat. Now we'll see where it's coming from in a minute. Now, what's Yirmiyahu saying in the beginning? Yirmiyahu is trying to prevent the Khurban. He's telling the king, if you want to save your kingdom and save your temple, all you need to do is act properly. He says as follows: Kol Hashem, and this is Yirmiyahu chapter 22, which is, I think Yirmiyahu is also out of chronological order, but that's a whole class in Yirmiyahu. Kol Mar Hashem, Rei Beit Melech Yehuda, v'dibart Hashem et hadavar hazeh, v'amart Shema davar Hashem Melech Yehuda, Hashem al kisei David, ata v'avadecha b'ayim b'shem eila. Says, he goes to the king, he says, you're sitting on the throne of King David. Why was King David chosen? So we'll see in a minute. Now, you're sitting on the throne of Malchut David. Kol Mar Hashem, asu mishpat u'tzedakah. You were chosen to continue the legacy of King David, who was known for chesed, mishpat, and tzedakah. That's why he was chosen over Shaul. That's what made his kingdom. That was his key trait. He used his military strength and his political wisdom, etc., to build a nation doing mishpat and tzedakah. It's in Shmuel Aleph Mefurash. We'll see it later. Okay? If you do that, you can keep your kingdom. But if you don't do that, it's over. Okay? If you continue, if your kingdom is known for chesed, mishpat, and tzedakah, then then your kingdom can stay. If you want to save your kingdom, rebuild your kingdom based on values of chesed, mishpat, and tzedakah, then no reason for korban. Now, you'll see, you were saying that's not going to kick the Babylonians away. Then that's if we have time, we'll talk about how complicated Yirmiyahu gets. But if you want to keep the temple, you can keep the temple, but focus now, take the next 70 years or so, and focus on your core values. And if you're after that, you can get your sovereignty back. Okay. Now, later in that chapter, he goes king by king and just throws the book at them. Oh, he's really harsh. He's harsh about how bad all the Davidic kingdoms. He goes through all the presidents and how bad each one was. Like some presidents do that. They say how bad the previous president was. So Yirmiyahu's going back how bad all the kings were, one by one. He gets to Yehoiakim. You've heard of him? Yeah. Yoshia's son, Tzidkiyahu's brother. One of the last kings. That was the first wave of exiles under Yehoiakim. Remember, it's called Yehoiakim, but Yehoiakim is the one who was king for 11 years before the Babylonians, and he's the one who decides to rebel against the Babylonians and doesn't listen to Yirmiyahu. We'll go back to that in a minute. But in his complaint about Yehoiakim, he's talking about you have all these building projects, but you're not paying your workers on time properly. What are they doing? They're building the king has all these building projects, but with his grandeur building, it's so important to build up Jerusalem, he doesn't care about human rights, about paying his workers on time, about things. He's not caring about justice doing it. He doesn't pay his workers, he takes advantage of his workers, etc. Are you in competition with the cedars of Lebanon? All you hear about is your great building projects and your towers, etc. Avicha, who's Avicha? Who is Joachim's father? Yoshiel, who was a good king. Avicha, your father, his focus was mishpat and tzedakah, and things were fine. Dan ani ve'avyon, he used his political power to build a just society, to have justice, and take care of the poor and the needy. Halohi adatoti num Hashem. Isn't it clear what Yirmiyahu is saying now? What it means to know God? It's to know why we're chosen, to know how we need to behave. In understanding, give me another use of the word ladat when you have a deep understanding and a close connection with someone. Remember, Adam yadat chava ishto. A marriage relationship, a proper one, is a complete relationship, which is with understanding and trust, etc. That's to know. So using the same word, the Kabbalists make a big deal about that. But the idea of knowing God with analogy to husband and wife, it's classic in Kabbalistic thought. L'chododi talks about that. Remember the whole now that Shirashim is about that idea. So he's saying, Yirmiyahu is saying, to know God is to know why you're chosen, and to apply that in your day-to-day life. And that's your core values have to be chesed, mishpat, and tzedakah. Now, it's still important to be a nation, but if God blesses you with sovereignty and power, and be gvura, chokhmah, what was the other one? Chokhmah, gvura, and osher. If God blesses you with those are tools to use them to do tzedakah and mishpat. If we have time, we'll see Tilim Ayin Bet, which I should have put on the page, but I didn't. Now, where's this theme of mishpat and tzedakah coming from? So I'll give a quick review of something I'm sure we've done before. Remember Sefer Bereshit? It's like about being chosen and why we're chosen. Does God ever have a conversation with Abram in Sefer Bereshit? They ever have a dialogue? God and Abram. What? By stone, and beforehand with Brit Ben Abtarim. After the first Middle East war with the 4 kings and 5 kings, they have a little conversation about Israel's future.
Wasn't that just a dream?
It's a dream and a conversation, yeah. But still, they're it says Vayi Dvar Hashem b'Machazel Lemor. So Dvar Hashem was in a dream. The Rambam says the stone sword was also a dream. Okay, but that's how God speaks to you in dreams. That's the Rambam in Mourning about how God. But Chumash describes it as a conversation.
Abraham had a conversation with Hashem on Sodom. Not a conversation.
But by Sada Vayar, Rambam says that was a prophetic dream. Right. Anyway, I'm saying. What I'm getting at. There are 2 times in Chumash where there appears to be a dialogue between God and Avraham Avinu. There's no dialogue between God and Yitzchak or between God and Yaakov. Right? They'll pray to God and God might talk to them, but there's never a dialogue. There's no dialogue. God appears to him, but there's no dialogue. There's no dialogue. God tells him, makes him a promise, and Yaakov makes a promise to build a house for God when he gets back. Okay, if God keeps his promise, or when God keeps his promise. But there's no question answer, and there are 2 dialogues in Chumash between our ancestors, with Abram and God. That's it. They have to be important. The first was the whole theme of Brit Ben Abtarim, about God watching our history, and the need to go through slavery and oppression before becoming a nation. So God can say, "Remember, you were a slave in Egypt," which relates to our behavior. There's our transformative memory of our suffering to redeem that by how we treat others. That's one key theme. And the other theme is the story of Sodom. Now, in the story of Sodom, let's just go back. If you have your Chumash open, you can take a quick look. Take a quick look in Perek Yudchet and Bereshit. I'm getting at Yirmiyahu was building. I'm mentioning the 2 dialogues because Yirmiyahu was building his whole understanding of knowing God based on that dialogue. Which all the Nevi'im will talk about these ideas, all basing it on Perek Yudchet in Bereshit. Now, if I go back to what's the first thing what was the first one-way conversation? That's not a conversation. The first time God talks to Abram, what's he tell him? Does he make a promise? V'eschal gadol is a destiny. That's not a reward. That's the purpose of the journey. God wants a nation. He wants a nation to serve him forever. Now, that's what Har Sinai is about. We become a nation and we're free, and then that nation takes upon himself a commitment to be God's people forever. But the reason why God wants a nation is in order to get to Har Sinai. And therefore, the goal of God telling Abraham to begin a journey is, it's not a promise for reward, but it's the goal, your destiny, the reason for the journey. And what's it say next? I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Through you I can bring blessing to other nations. Now the question is going to be, how does Avram, or that nation, how will the nation of Avram bring blessing to other nations? Is it something magical or something logical? In other words, if blessing is fulfilling your potential, how come the nation of Avram, how can the Jewish people be a blessing to other nations? By setting an example, we'll see in a minute. And that theme is developed through a story of Sodom. Got it? Now, look in Perek. So that's the first conversation is in Yud Bet. The next, that's God giving the promise. The first dialogue is the need to go down in Brit Ben Abtarim. Got to watch your history. He'll save you from oppression, but you have to go through oppression first. You become a nation outside your land and then get your land. And then we have the birth of Ishmael, and then we have Brit Milah. And then finally in Perek Yudchet, after Brit Milah and Yitzchak is going to be chosen, we have Perek Yudchet. Have it? Look at Perek Yudchet. You see one in the Sach Koren. Look at Perek Yudchet and Yutet. Whoa, it's a massive long parshiah. You see that? There's no parshiah breaks. All Perek Yudchet and all Perek Yutet, some 60 psukim, all one parshiah. Got that? Now, whenever you have long parshiot like that, there's always a reason for it. Because usually parshiot are like paragraphs. But for some reason, Chumash is putting them all together. Now, from what you remember, what's the first topic in Perek Yudchet? It's famous because it's the first Aliyah. The first topic in Perek Yudchet with the 3 angels, with the 3 men. What? Yeah. But what's the first topic? The first 8 psukim. Remember Avram and Sarah, this power couple? And what's being emphasized in the first 8 psukim in Perek Yudchet? Hachnas Sorchim. Every pasuk except for the first one is Hachnas Sorchim. Running everything is going out of the way to help other people, and that's why Rashi says even the first pasuk is Hachnas Sorchim. Because why is Avram sitting outside his tent? Looking for guests. You see what Rashi is so cool when you understand how Chumash works. Anyway, that's a class on Rashi. Now, what's the next topic after these 3 people sit down to a nice meal? They want to know what time is dinner? No, they're going to go to dinner to his cousin. Now, what do they tell him? They have some good news, right? And basically, don't give up hope. You can have a child, and it's no laughing matter, and don't laugh it off. Take it seriously. Because it can happen, but anyway, they're encouraging Avram and Sarah not to give up and to have a child, and it's no laughing matter, and therefore call the kid Yitzchak. Now, so that's an important topic also. Now, what's the next topic? The same 3. What's tying all the stories together? The three angels. Now, what did Rashi teach you right in the beginning? How come there's 3 different angels?
Each one has a mission.
Each one's job. So I always get a question: why are they sharing a taxi? If each one has a separate job, this guy's to go to save Lot and Stone, and this guy's to destroy Sodom, and this guy's to heal Avram, etc., or give the news. There's 4 jobs, and they gotta. Some guy needs a double job. But bottom line, what's happening? Why are they sharing? Why are they traveling together? The fact that they're traveling together means what? All 3 themes are connected. It's the destruction of Sodom, right? And the birth of Yitzchak, and Achnas Orchim all have to be connected. And we'll see how they're all connected now. I'm saying why they're all one parshiah. So as the three men or Menachem are leaving, they're taking a look at Sodom, right? And what did they tell Avram Avinu in the name of God? Look at Pasuk Chaf. You tell me, what did they tell Avram about? What are they going to do? Don't read this. Tell me what you remember. What does God tell Avram? He's going to destroy Sodom. You're not there. But that's not what it says. God doesn't tell Avram, I'm going to destroy Sodom. God tells Avram, there's something rotten in Sodom. Right? I'm going down to check it out, and I'm deliberating, should I or shouldn't I destroy Sodom? Right? We didn't send the B-52s yet, or the B-2s, wherever they are now. Right? We're deliberating, should we or shouldn't we? Right? And who's going to join the staff meeting to make that decision? Up until now, God made his own decisions, or had his board members were up in heaven. Remember when he makes man? Remember he has. But now, for the first time, God's about to make a decision, and who does he share his decision making with? With Avram Avinu. Because what's he tell Avram Avinu? That's Pasuk Chaf. See in Pasuk Chaf? God tells Avram, Sakat Sodom v'Amora ki Rabba. There's this cry of oppression coming out of Sodom, and they have terrible sin. Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Erdana be'ere. I'm going to go down and check it out. Okay. Hatzaka ba'ila sukala b'mlo eda. It's the cry of oppression that's coming out of Sodom. Is it beyond repair or not? And I'll know. So God's deliberating, and he's sharing with Avram Avinu his deliberation. He's like, something's bad in Sodom. It's really bad. I might destroy it, I might not. Now, that opening statement causes Avram with what response? What's Avram want to know now? Now that God says, I'm going to check out the city.
Will you kill the good people along with the bad people?
That's his preface. I think that's his preface because that's a given. That's what happens. You understand? It's called collateral damage. That's usually what happens in nature. But if you bomb that city, what happens? Some people, innocent people, might destroy, but sometimes you have to do that. Remember, we have that problem all the time. If there's 100 terrorists and one innocent individual there, you bomb it, right? If there's 100 innocent people, 1,000 innocent people, and one terrorist, well, some people say bomb them anyhow. Other people, what?
Bomb it anyway.
Okay, well, don't we have that machloket to this day? So that's God's conversation with Avram Avinu, and he's assuming that when you make decisions, there's collateral damage, and therefore, what's he ask? If you find 50 righteous people, what should you do?
Save the place.
Save not only the 50 righteous, save who? Save everybody. Now, then Avram's assumption is innocent people are going to die if you make that decision, but you might have to. But and God says, if I find 50, I'll save the whole city. He doesn't pray for God to make a surgical raid and save that one innocent person. You follow? You can't do that. That's not on the table. The question is, to what degree is God willing to save an evil city if there's a couple righteous people there? Now, what's the logic of saving the city if there's 50 righteous people? Because maybe those 50, tomorrow there might be 60. And God says 50, piece of cake, remember? And then 45, 40, etc. And Avram stops even arguing at what point? 10. He's not arguing with God. He's trying to clarify the ways of God. And what's God's bottom line message? Even if I find 10 righteous people, there's still a chance to do tshuva. Got that? In other words, Avram needs to understand the ways of God. That's to know God. And to know that God has expectations from man to be good, and knows that man can do evil, but knows that leadership or that behavior is contagious and people can influence other people, and therefore righteous people can save an evil city, and vice versa. And righteous people can die when other people are evil. That's the ways of God, to understand that. And that should motivate people to be good. And not only they have to be good, they have to make sure other people are good.
Except you would think that if there were more righteous people there, it would be easier to influence the bad people. He keeps going down in number. Like, if 50 good people can't influence an entire population, how can 10 people?
No, but he says 50, he says people can't. He said when God says 50 can, and then he said 40. If God said 50 no, he wouldn't have gone for 40. He's only going for 40 because God said 50 yes. Okay, now, so go back to Pasuk Tet Zayin. I'm sorry, go back, in Pasuk Chav. In Pasuk Chav, God tells Abram, Stakat Stom B'Am Lakirah, but that's the whole conversation begins in Pasuk Chav. But before Pasuk Chav, there's 3 Pasukim in Chumash where Chumash is talking to the reader. Look at the Hebrew. In Pasuk Chav is Vayomer Hashem, means God is saying that to Abraham Avinu. Look how Pasuk Yud Zayin begins. Remember, in Tet Zayin, the 3 men leave and they're looking at Sdom on the way out, and Avram's with him. In Pasuk Yud Zayin, it doesn't say Vayomer Hashem, it says Vashem Amar, which means God had said. It's the last time God talks to himself in Chumash. Tonight he's been talking to himself all the time. This is the last time God talks to himself. He's been talking to himself ever since day 1. If you read Chumash, remember? Now, the last time God talks to himself, and what's God say? To himself? Again, Chumash is telling the reader that before God entered this dialogue with Avraham Avinu, God said something to himself. What did he say? Hamchasani ma'Avram asher ani oseh. Can I die from Avram what I'm about to do? What's God about to do? No. He's not about to destroy Sodom. He's about to decide whether he should or shouldn't. Got it? God's deliberating. God says, I need to share with Avram Avinu my deliberation because Avram needs to know the ways of God. Why? Look at that. Why? Why does God have to share with Avram his deliberation? Because one day Avram's going to be a goy gadol, Parshat Lech Lecha. Okay? And he'll bring blessing to other nations. Goy haaretz. Ki dativ. What's that mean? Who knows what that means?
I know him as.
No. Not yadati. It's not what God knows. It's I came to know him in order that. Understand? I came to yadativ, not yadati. Ki dativ. I came to know him. I chose him for this reason. I came to know him. God came to know. See the word to know? The word ladat is the key word. It's called a milah mancha. I came to know him. Why? So he would command his children, and they their children. Okay? And they should keep the ways of God to do tzedakah mishpat, in order that God will bring on Avram what he said. What did God say about Avram? How will Avram's offspring become a blessing to other nations? By following the ways of God, by doing tzedakah mishpat. And who does Avram have to teach this to? To his children, teach their children. Now, have we had a story about Avram having children? That's no laughing matter, is it? I got it. Have we had this? Have we an example of doing tzedakah mishpat and achnasat orchim? You see, everything ties together. As the precursor to this dialogue, Avram, we emphasize for the first time in Chumash, Avram's achnasat orchim, 8 psukim. The news of the birth of Yitzchak. Avram's going to have a child, and Avram has a speech ready for Yitzchak's bar mitzvah. Why? Because what's he going to say to the Rabbi? You know, Yitzchak, on the day you were conceived, got it? Or when I got the news, when we got the ultra, whatever it is. Right? When we got the news of your birth, something terrible happened. The whole city was destroyed. You follow? Why? And there weren't enough righteous people in that city to save it. But God had a conversation with me that day that you're going to have a child and you're going to start a nation, and that nation is going to be able to fix future storms by being the 50 tzaddikim who can save an evil society. Got the idea? Right, so that's why the whole idea of knowing God, knowing, understanding why we're chosen, is all rooted on these psukim. That's why it's the last time God talks to himself. It's why God can't hide this from Avraham Avinu, because we're finally Chumash explaining the reason why God's choosing a nation. Now, how to become a nation serving God, we get a guidebook called Torah Har Sinai. Remember, an instruction book of how to become a nation serving God. We have laws for a king and laws for a national center. We have laws of how to go to war and laws about a just society. Remember, all laws in Devarim. We have Parshat Mishpatim. We have Kedoshim Tiyu. We have a guidebook about how to be God's people. And because we need to remember why we're chosen, we need on a regular basis to visit God. And remember, we want to be close to God to remember why we're chosen. So why do we go to the temple? To remember our chosenness. Why do we pray? To remember, because we're employees and not consumers. Now, when we have this symbol of our connection to God, and God can help us, but he helps us so we can help him. When the whole relationship with God is based on what can God do for us as opposed to what we can do for God, then that's what the prophets are claiming you misunderstood what the temple's about. And that's what Yirmiyahu was complaining about, that's what Isaiah was complaining about. I'm trying to get, why is Yirmiyahu using the word to know God? Why is he using the word tzedek u'mishpat over and over again in the connection of knowing God? I'll bring one earlier example which proves my point. You've heard of, was there a temple ever destroyed before the first temple was destroyed? What's the first example of a korban of a mikdash? In Shiloh, remember? Shiloh was destroyed. Why?
Because they took the
Because of
Aron.
What?
Because they took the Aron into the wall.
That's how. But why didn't that help them? Because again, they thought, oh God, we have this magic Aron because they're in consumer mode. Because our God's stronger than your God. But what's causing this misunderstanding of the religion? Who's running the rabbinate? Well, the old chief rabbi was okay, but his kids, they're a disaster. Remember B'nai Eli? Now look at source E. Okay, we know this from Rosh Hashanah. V'elech Elkanah Ramata Davito v'Hana Hayom Mesharet Hashem b'Pnei Eli HaKohen. Remember, Hannah dedicates her child to God. Right. That's source. Now ready? Scene 2. What happens? Story of B'nai Eli. Before we get to the story of B'nai Eli, there's an introduction. U'B'nai Eli, B'nai Bli'al. Bli'al is easy. What's that mean? Bli'al. Without anyone, no one responsible to him. Lo Yedu et Hashem. What's it mean? They didn't study Aristotle. You understand why I'm using that example? Because I'm sort of arguing with the Rabbi. But the Rambam talks about knowing God as a mitzvah, but he understands it, an intellectual understanding of God. With deductive reasoning. You're familiar with all that? But I think there's the prophets don't talk about that. To know God in the biblical sense is understanding why you're chosen to be a nation doing mishpat and tzedakah. That's the definition in Breshit. Now, and therefore the introduction to the story is that B'nai Eli don't know God. They pray to God, they're running the temple. They're the chief rabbinate at the time. They're running Shiloh. What are they doing wrong? Okay? Remember what they did wrong? Right? Whenever someone brought a korban, all they cared about was the meat that they get. Right? They didn't care about doing it the right way. It was all self-interest. And they're running the rabbinate just for funding and their own personal gain. And they took advantage of women. They cared about women's rights. They met them. It was a terribly corrupt rabbinate, but they're running the temple. And they're claiming to be representing God. God says, if that's Shiloh, God has to destroy Shiloh. And we make the mistake of taking their own to battle. It doesn't help us because we're not worthy of its help. And that leads to the Korban. And that's hit rock bottom at the end of Sefer Shoftim, beginning of Sefer Shmuel. And Shmuel is going to fix it. By getting rid of, by doing real tshuva. Remember, Misha Nad L'Shmuel B'Mitzvah. And it'll lead to a kingdom and to David, who's going to be known for doing Mishpat and Tzedakah L'Chol Amo. That's going to be the turnaround in history. All begins with Tfilat Hana. Tfilat Hana begins the turnaround, leading to Shmuel, leading to Shaul, leading to David, and David finally being a king who does Mishpat and Tzedakah. If you have for homework, you can do Tehillim in bed. Everything I just told you is that's Yeah, that's David's ethical will to Shlomo to build a nation doing mishpat and tzedakah. And
that's why Shmuel is a separate book in and of itself.
Itself, yeah. I mean, Shmuel, that's a whole share in Sefer Shmuel, but it's one of the themes in Sefer Shmuel. Now, to top it off, I want to end with Yishayahu because it's so harsh. Now, I'm not doing shir in Yirmiyahu, but in Yirmiyahu, what's the problem? Yirmiyahu, early in the reign of, already in the name of Yoshia, but for sure during Yehoiakim, when things start getting bad, everyone's coming to the temple in chapter 7 in Yirmiyahu, and the false prophet is telling the people, Echal Hashem, Echal Hashem, Echal Hashem, and Yirmiyahu tells them, that's not enough. It's not enough just to come and daven, if you want God to save you. Do mishpat and tzedakah, take care of the poor and the needy, society, speak the truth. That's all good. That's going to lead from Perek Zayin to Perek Chet and Tet. That's Haftarot for Tisha B'Av. Then, because they don't listen, right? A couple years later, God says, I warned you and warned you for the last 20 years. I've given you the same message. You guys just don't get it. You're still in consumer mode. You don't understand employee mode. And I have to do something harsh because the temple is causing more harm than good. Because what happens? People turn to God for help. God doesn't help them. Then either they pray harder or they turn to other gods. That's why we get to idol worship again. Because if God's not answering your prayers, you go to some other God. Or you pray to your God harder, but you're not fixing your ways. You don't understand the core cause. Now, and so that's why Yirmiyahu is such a complicated book, because people attack him, not because he says, everyone says it's okay to be nice, but because he's saying give in to Bavel, that's why he becomes a false, that's why they accuse him, and that makes the book so complicated. Now, let's go back to the Haftarah right before Tisha of Isaiah. Everyone's heard of Isaiah chapter 1, but look at the wording. I want to prove, now, Isaiah is 4 kings, Uziel, Yotam, Achaz, Chizkiel, and the time period of Uziel begins the book, that's chapter 2, with the Chon Beit Hashem Bro Sharim, B'Achri Taimim. That's how great things could be when everyone's wealthy and strong and rich. But the first chapter is, again, out of chronological order, because it's the time of Chizkiel. Remember Chizkiel time everyone's from. Right? They cleaned up the temple, idol worship's gone, Bamod gone even. But how do I know it's Isaiah? I'll start from Pasuk Zayin in source F. Artzechem Shmama. What's that mean? Your land is wasted. Get it? Arechem Sufot Beish. Your cities are burnt out. Admechem Lenetchem Zarim Ochlim Otal. Shmama Kamapahet Zarim. That's describing Sancheriv's wiping out of the 10 tribes. And remember, Lachish is destroyed. That we know, we have proof of that, don't we? In archaeology, and we have his whole relief in his secret. All of Israel was destroyed. The 10 tribes, most of Yehudah. The last thing left was Yerushalayim, was saved at the last minute. But the people can't understand, how can you have such a righteous king like Chizkiel, who fixed up the temple and does all this great reform, got rid of all the Bamot, and what's still happening? God's still allowing the Babylonians to wipe us out. Remember, Chizkiel becomes king 6 years before the 10 tribes are exiled. And before Jerusalem saved only in year 12 or something like that. It takes a long... even with all Chizkiel's reform, religious reform, it's not enough to get rid of the Assyrians, because Isaiah told them, Isaiah was saying, in chapter 1 he's saying, or chapter 2 and 3 he's saying, I'm sending Ashur to punish you because you're not listening to this message of fixing your ways. Now, in this Haftarah, God's going to explain to him why it's been so bad. Now, how bad have we been? He says, right? He says, it's so bad, we're like Sodom and Amorah. Now, the first time you read it, what's it sound like? The Sodom and Amorah analogy is explaining how bad the country is. Got that? Your country is it's so destroyed. It looks as bad as Sodom. But if it looks as bad as Sodom, what's that mean? Its sin is like Sodom, and therefore, what's he call the people? He calls the people Shimuna. Shimuna Shimu Dvar Hashem Ksine Sodom Azinu Torah Elinu Amamora. Isaiah is using 2 analogies. One, Shirat Azinu, whose theme is don't blame God when things goes wrong, blame yourselves. Remember, Hal Hashem Tigvu Luzot, Am Navav V'lo Chacham, Hatzur Tamim Pa'olo. Those when things go wrong, don't blame God, blame yourselves. And he's using the analogy of Sodom and Amorah, which has to take us back to the Avram story. That's Perek Yud Chet and Breshit in the last conversation, which is about Tzedek and Mishpat. Now, what's my proof that Isaiah sees the sin of Sodom wasn't sodomy, it was a lack of Hafnasat Orchim. Remember Chazal, and Isaiah, Yechezkel says explicitly, the sin of Sodom was a lack of Hafnasat Orchim. And as soon as Lot harbors guests, everyone gets an SMS and they demonstrate, we're kicking you out of town. Now, listen to what God says. Lamadi rov zivchechem, Who needs your, that's I told you, that was my title before, don't give me that bull. Okay, that was in the title here also. Yom Hashem, Sabati Olot, V'chelid Marim, V'dam Parim, U'kfasim, Atum Lo Chafatzi. I don't want your animals. You follow? If you bring an animal as a reminder of your covenantal commitment as an employee to show your closeness, that's wonderful. But if it's a cover-up and you don't understand why you're chosen, what's the point? When you come to visit me, you're trespassing. I don't want to see you here. Says, I don't want your sacrifices, your sweet-smelling incense, and your holidays. I can't stand them. That's it. It's your gatherings together, your meetings and your prayer groups. I hate them. The way you celebrate your Yom Tovim, I can't take it. God says, they're annoying. You know the feeling. Nileti naso. I use that. That's no Yom Tov Sheni jokes, but sometimes you just can't take Yom Tov anymore. If you remember, never mind. Okay. Now here's the hardest part. When you put your hands up in prayer, I'm hiding my face, hiding my eyes from you. Prayer is not helping because there's evil in your society. You don't care about human life. You're responsible for unnecessary bloodshed. Now, what fix it? Quit doing evil. Clean up your act. Fix your society. Again, then that'll fix things. See what he's saying? That's the same Yirmiyahu's message of knowing God. It all goes back to the story of Sodom. You see the theme of Mishpat and Tzedakah? You can't miss it. The city was once full of righteousness and now it's all corrupt. Remember, everyone's counterfeiting their metal, counterfeiting money. Your ministers are all, going astray. Kulam Ganed, they're all robbing people. Okay? They're taking bribes, like Shochad, Rodev Shamonim. Instead of using their government funding for projects helping the poor and the needy and those in need, they're using it for their own self-interest and taking bribes, etc. Yotom lo yishpotu abrov v'nom lo yivo elihim. L'cheinu Hashem tzvot aver Yaakov v'yanechem Yitzharai. Guys, I've had it with you. I have to wipe out your leadership. You need a cleaning. Then finally, pasuk havav ashiva shavtach rishona v'yatzayka v'tchila. Achrein nikre lechem yer tzedek yer ki'anamana. If I'll bring back true leadership, right? Doing what Bracha Shmoneh is built on this. Hashiva is built on this pasuk exactly. And what's the bracha? Melech ohev tzedek u'mishpat. And therefore, tziyom mishpat tiferet b'shabbat b'tzedakah. That's where we end the Haftarah with the theme of mishpat and tzedakah. You can't miss that message. You can't miss how Isaiah is tying together the theme of Sodom with mishpat and tzedakah. And in light of Yirmiyahu, that means to know God. Now, it's such a core Jewish value and such a core idea of tefillah. In understanding, tefillah has to be transformative. The second tefillah is just some ritual act. It's important, don't get me wrong, and korbanot are important, and the temple is important, we pray for it, but it can't lead to misunderstanding of God. It can't turn into consumer mode. That's the best way to buy God off, if I feed him. That at work. And when people think that's what the temple is about, God has to take away the temple because it's more harm than good. Basically, God takes the temple away when we're the firmest. Not when because you're claiming to be God's people and you misbehave, that God can't tolerate. That's a chilul Hashem. If you don't claim to be God's people and misbehave, you're like everyone else. If you claim to be God's people and don't act with mishpat and tzedakah, that's when God gets most angry. And that's why the biggest destruction happens when we're almost after Chizkiyahu's great reform, they're still not using the temple the right way. God almost destroys it and saves it the last minute because they do a last minute tshuva. Yirmiyahu, it's too late. And the people don't listen, and they're praying to God for help, but they're not fixing their ways. They're not asking Ayeh Hashem. Now if we go back to our opening thing, the Kohanim, what are they doing wrong? They're not asking the right questions, why God's not with us. Tovsei Torah lo yida'uni makes sense now? The people teaching Torah don't understand why they're given Torah. The central theme of Torah, how it has to be transformed and affect your behavior, living a world of honesty and truth, and righteousness and kindness and justice. The society has to be known for that. If Am Yisrael isn't known as being honest, truthful, upright, kind, and benevolent, that can't be, because that's how we bring blessing to other nations. Now, how to do that, you can argue. But realizing that's a goal, again, you can have a mature argument how to achieve that and what we have to prioritize. But not seeing that as a goal, that's where things go really bad. Again, you can have a legitimate argument how to achieve it. You can right wing. That's a legitimate argument. But not seeing that as a goal, that's when we're missing a whole point. And then Banivim Nivu Baval, again, that's consumer mode, and the political leaders, how Royim Pashubi, not following God's instructions the right way, not listening to what the right Nivim are telling them. Those are all, and that's what I'm saying. The Haftarot the Chazal picked for the Yom Tovim, for Rosh Hashanah, they're exactly the Haftarot where the Nivim explain why God's destroying the temple. And for the fast days, they're not to remember what happened, but why it happened, and to be worthy. We're not praying for God to rebuild the temple. We're praying to be worthy of having a temple and choosing the right way. But think if you have a temple, then you just pray there and you'll be better. You'll get better deals. You get Black Friday over. You get everything's on sale for cheap. Then that's a total misunderstanding. Okay, well we'll stop here. But again, I want you to appreciate the Haftarot for the 3 weeks and once Chazal chose.
But the Shkilat Musaf that we say is exactly the opposite. We say rebuild the temple so we can bring korbanos.
Which korbanot?
On Musaf.
And what's the Sir Lachatat? The Sir Lachatat is Yosef and his brothers. And the Timur Chumash. The Ayal Olah is the Akedah story. The seven Parim is the Avram and Abimelech. Remember? Every korban has a theme in Chumash.